So today I'm going to be ranking all 15 main series Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. Obviously this is my opinion. I've looked around online. This list does not really match up with many of the people I've seen. So I expect some people to agree, some people to disagree. Drop down in the comments. If you have any opinions about what I say, I'd be interested to hear. Join in a bit of discourse. And I just want to say a disclaimer for anyone that is just going to be getting into this series or hasn't read all the books. Obviously there's going to be some spoilers involved in this video, so make sure to click away if you don't want to hear anything you don't want to hear. I'll put it to you that way. And before I get into the list, I feel like I should just mention my background as a Diary of a Wimpy Kid connoisseur, so to say. The first time I ever heard about Diary of a Wimpy Kid was when I was a little boy, and I was playing games on this website called Funbrain, which was actually made, I believe, by Jeff Kinney, who's the author of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I remember there's this one skateboarding game, and there's a billboard, I think on the left-hand top corner, and it said Diary of a Wimpy Kid coming soon, and I thought nothing, because I didn't know what that was. But sure enough, the holidays came around, and what did I get? I got the first Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, and the rest is history. I've read all 15 books. Earlier ones I've read more than the later ones, but I like to think I know my stuff. So let's just jump into it. Coming in at number 15 is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Deep End. So this book actually is the most recent book. It came out this past 2020, and it doesn't do it for me. I gotta be honest, it didn't do it for me. The premise of this book I should talk about is the Heffley family is all cooped up, and I sort of like the beginning because I can tell Jeff's sort of playing on the whole pandemic scene. The family is all, I think, in grandma's basement or something, and they're all there kind of stuck 24/7 because of what happens in the previous installment, Wrecking Ball, which is number 14, where a hot tub falls through the house. And believe me, we're going to talk about that pretty soon. But they're all stuck in the house. They're all basically in quarantine, I feel like, is what Jeff was sort of doing. And then in Grandma's driveway is Uncle Gary's RV, and they decide to take an RV trip. And I have some problems with that. I really do. And the main problem is that, if you guys know what I'm talking about, book 9 of the series, The Long Haul, is a road trip based book. Not a big fan of road trip based books. So that's something to keep in mind. But I really didn't like that they were just recycling the same concept. This book pretty much follows the formula of the later books in the series, of being a disaster comedy, which is not how the series starts, and I might be a bit of a purist. But it's basically, they're taking a vacation, they're on an RV, everything just goes wrong, it just gets ridiculous. It's a theme we're going to be seeing a lot in the beginning of this video. And I'm just not a big fan. That's just a personal taste. I know there's some people out there that really enjoy that kind of stuff, like the Vacation movie, National Lampoon, all that junk. I'm personally not a big fan. The other thing I don't like about this book is that all the characters, the only main characters is the family. I don't believe Rowley is even involved, which is a shame. We all need a little bit of Rowley in our lives. But everybody in the family sort of becomes one character, if that makes sense. There's a couple of moments in this book where even someone as distinct as Roderick, who we all know to be distinct, I think that's the first word we use to describe Roderick, is distinct. He's not distinct. They all sort of are acting as a unit, and the things that sort of happen in this book are so fantastical, and the RV gets drowned, and then they end up blocking a bridge with the RV, and then everyone starts driving over. I mean, look at this. Look, I mean, I don't want to be mean. Jeff, Kenny, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I don't mean to rip you apart. This book just wasn't doing it for me. I'm sorry. That's why it's number 15. Let's move right along. Coming in at number 14 is The Getaway, which is the 12th book in the series. And honestly, I could almost tie this with The Deep End, in that it's basically the same premise. So I know I mentioned that number 9, The Long Haul, which we will get to. I promise we will get to. Is a road trip based book. Well, this is basically a similar premise. It's not a road trip, but air travel to an island, a private island. Well, not a private island, a vacation island. Excuse me. But yeah, it's just a similar thing. I don't have much to say about this other than it's a disaster comedy. Everything just goes wrong. I mean, this theme of the whole disaster, everything going wrong, everything just getting more and more ridiculous, is sort of what the series became. It didn't start that way, and I am just not a fan of the direction it's been going in. So for that, ranking this number 14. Is there a reason why this is above The Deep Ends? I don't know. I really don't know. I think this is pretty on par. I think the reason The Deep End is worse than this is because of that ending where the RV... I should explain. The RV, and this is back in number 15, the RV... There's a bridge that's broken, everybody's stuck on this island, and then the RV perfectly clips into the bridge. I mean, there's not much else to say. That's why that's 15. This is why that's 14. But The Getaway, not a fan. Sorry. Coming in at number 13 is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Wrecking Ball, which is book 14. Came out in 2019. This is a book. This is a book. It starts off better than actually a lot of the later ones do. I remember when I first started reading this, I thought, oh, you know, this might be a little bit of a back to basics, like the Beatles' The White Album or something. But it wasn't. Basically, the premise of this one is Greg's aunt, I think, or great aunt, passes away, and they inherit her money. Which is an interesting book premise. And, you know, the family doesn't really know what to do with the money, but eventually the mom decides to renovate the house. And obviously there's a lot of different things that happen in between. Frankly, I haven't read this book as much as, you know, some of the earlier ones. But I just can't get past how it ends. How it ends is they build the extension. The whole book is just building this house, the constant renovation humor. I mean, if you lived in a house while the house was being renovated, you might love this thing. But at the end of the book, the construction workers decide to bring the hot tub either from the front of the house to the back of the house or the back to the front, I forget, using a crane, and they decide to use the crane to bring it over the house. And then while it's over the house, the hot tub falls off and falls through the house. So basically the whole book is building and building this house and building it, and then it just all falls apart in the end. Which, disaster comedy. I mean, I'm going to say it a million times in the beginning of this video. Disaster comedy. Not a fan. There are some saving graces of this book. I think the beginning style is pretty decent. It reminds me a bit of the original Diary of a Wimpy Kid style. But still, it's just a little bit over the top for my taste. So, that's book 13. Coming in at number 12 is The Long Haul. Now I'm going to preface this, and you know, I've mentioned this book a few times. I'm going to preface this by saying that this, I almost ranked as last. I don't like The Long Haul. I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm sorry to people who do like the long haul. I don't like the long haul. Because this was the book that really changed the series, I think. This was the turning point. This was the Kid A of Diary of a Wimpy Kid if Kid A sucked. This is book 9. So we're still in single digits here. I mean, the last few books we looked at was 14, 12, and then 15. This is 9, okay? We're still, in the later half of the series, but still single digits. This was the road trip book. This is the book to change Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And you got to give it credit. And that's the reason I was actually going to rank it lowest, is because this was, I think Jeff put this out and some people really liked it. And Jeff said, oh, I'm going to do that. And for that reason, it's out. But it's not as bad as The Deep End or The Getaway. And more than that, it was the first of its kind, which you have to give credit to. Because, maybe a movie sucks, but if they make a sequel on the movie that sucked, that's a whole separate issue. So you gotta give credit to the original. But this book, I mean, it's just, the things that happen in it are just completely unrealistic. And that's the first time, I mean, I don't want to say unrealistic. I think anyone who's been on a road trip knows it gets a little rowdy, if you know what I mean. But I mean, some of these things are just insane. Particularly with the pig. I have a lot to say about the pig, who ends up becoming a mainstay in the book. The series, I mean, for a couple of books, if not the rest of them. I don't remember where, I think the pig left at some point. I'm really losing my creds here, but I think the pig left at some point. But this is where the pig comes from. Is Manny guesses something correct, however many things are in a jar, at some county fair, and he wins a pig. And nobody wants to keep the pig, but the pig is causing all this trouble. I don't know, they end up keeping the pig. But they get chased. I mean, there's a point where they're in traffic and seagulls come into the car. I mean, I'm right there. If I can find it. I mean, the car falls apart at some point. They lose their key at the water park for the locker. I'm just flipping through it right now. It's just all this stuff. It's just, I mean, this says it right here. This all says it right here. Do you see what I'm? They broke the sunroof, and then they had to use saran wrap, and then it started raining. I mean, I don't read this series to just watch some people suffer, That's not for me. This book, I just don't like it. But interestingly enough, when I was doing some research, as the connoisseur I am, when I was doing research on other people's rankings and all, people like this book. And I respect that. If you like that genre, if you like reading about things that get crazier and crazier, that's you. Hats off to you. It's just not for me. So, that's that. What are we at now? Oh boy, I went on for a while on that one. I think we're at 11. Coming in at 11 is The Meltdown. Now, The Meltdown is book 13 in the series. Not a disaster. This one is also a repetition book, which kind of frustrates me a little because anyone will know that book 6, Cabin Fever, is famously about a snowstorm. So when I saw this cover with more snow, I thought, well, I mean, there's just more weather to talk about, Jeff. There's more weather to talk about. This book it's mostly fine. I mean, there's some good moments, there's some bad moments. I think we've really crossed the threshold of offensive books. But there is one offensive part that I think just is worth noting. And I know you're not supposed to really harp on the bad stuff. You know what? I'm going to preface this with a good thing. So the premise of this book is there's some giant blizzard that comes through. I forget if they get off for school or not. And everyone on his street, Surrey Street, they set up these big forts, these big snow forts, and have a huge snowball fight. And I give this book credit because that was my dream as a kid, and I bet that was everybody's dream when they were kids, was to have a huge snowball fight with everyone in the neighborhood, and they build these massive forts, and it's super organized. And obviously kids can't pull that off, really, because there's just too much involved to have it be so spur of the moment. So this is a fun little fantasy trip. I'll give them that. But there's one thing that happens in this book that just drove me absolutely mental, and that was introducing everybody on his block, which was pages and pages long. And man, oh man, I mean, I'm just looking for it right now, but it just goes on for pages, just introducing all these different characters on this block, and you have to wonder how long this block is. I mean, this is just one of those touches of the unrealistic that really takes me out. I like to be in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid world. And those things, I'm just sitting there wondering, not only how many people are on this street, because, you know, who's got a long street? They're around. But the fact that they're all his age, I don't know, it just was a little... But this book is fine. I mean, obviously there's a drop in quality over the books. I mean, that's just in particular that naming passage, and it's so long. It's such a huge part of the book. And the big snowball fight is probably a third of the book, maybe even half. And that doesn't even include the list of people on the street. I mean, I can't get over that list. I'm sorry. So that's 11, The Meltdown. Moving along, I'm just going to take a sip of water. It's important to stay hydrated. Okay, number 10, Double Down. This book is fine. We're entering fine territory. This book is passable. I think if you are looking for a fine Diary of a Wimpy Kid book that's neither great nor bad, this is probably it. I mean, there are some good moments here. There's a lot of it is featured about this book series in this one called Spine Ticklers, which I thought was funny. That's obviously a rip on Goosebumps, which I'm sure every kid, at least my age, remembers reading in elementary school, and it was a whole fad. And so I thought that was fun. And but basically, yeah, I mean, he's in school. It's around Halloween time. He's trying to impress his classmates. I mean, that's the thing, is nothing's really going on here. It's just sort of another diary, but it's not all that unique in the series. That's why it's fine. One thing about this book that's a little bizarre is the back, which bills this book as being sort of about Greg and Rowley making a movie. It says, you know, Halloween's just around the corner, fright is coming at every angle. And then when he discovers a bag of gummy worms, it sparks an idea. Can Greg get his mom off his back by making a movie? And will he become rich and famous in the process? So when I first got this book, I was thinking, oh, Greg's, you know, it's all going to be about this movie. This movie doesn't come up until the 11th hour. I mean, this book just pops out of nowhere. I mean, this movie, excuse me. And it doesn't really happen for any reason. There's no reason why he starts making this movie. And it's not like he's just doing it for fun. He pretty much just finds some gummy worms and calls up Rowley and is like, oh my god, I have to make a movie with you. And I don't know, it just happens. Like, this is the movie. This is the movie section, if you can see. It's like very little. But yeah, this book is fine. No more to be said about that. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Double Down. There you go. Number 9, getting to the single digits, is Old School. So I remember liking this one, actually, when I read it. This is book 10. I don't know if I mentioned, Double Down's book 11. So this comes right before. This is book 10. One thing that strikes me about this book is that Jeff really starts diving into the long entries. Obviously, anyone who knows the series and also can tell from the title, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that the series is written in entry form. And in the beginning, in the first few books, the entries will be a page long, anywhere from a page to, if there's a lot going on, it'll take, you know, 5 to 10 pages to sort of tell a story. I remember this book, it really struck me as there being very few entries. It pretty much happens over, the beginning of the book is, I think the first half of the book is 1 day or 2 days, and then the second half of the book is a couple more days. So basically this book is in 2 parts. Basically the premise is the mom, Susan, wants the town to unplug from their electronics, which is sort of a theme that goes on through the books, because Greg is, a big video game guy, and the mom's always saying, go outside, So she takes that town-wide, and so the first half of the book is sort of the town that they all live in going unplugged, and the sort of chaotic adventures that ensue when they try to clean up a town park, which is something. And then the second half of the book, I actually like a lot more, and it's something I can relate to, and I'm sure a lot of people can, is the school is going on a retreat to some camp. I forget what they call it in this book, but it's, some classic camp name. Hardscrabble Farms. Old-fashioned values for today's youth is what they call it. And, obviously there's some hijinks involved. I appreciate that. There's some lore about some monster named Silas Scratch. That part was fine. I actually kind of enjoyed that part. The beginning was a little ridiculous, though. When they were cleaning up the town park, there's a whole police chase. Like, they have this prison bus come, and there's all these prisoners on the loose, and then Greg is trying to run away with one of them, and there's some kid that he's tutoring named Fru. Fru? I mean, Fru? Fru? I mean, Fru. There's not much else to say than Fru. I mean, that's just it. That's number 9. I think it's a fine book. Some good elements. First half a little bit weaker than the later half, but moving right along. So now we're getting to the better ones. I think we're almost there. I think this is the last of the fine books. We're at 22 minutes here. Goodness me. All right. This is The Third Wheel, which is book 7, and this is I'm ranking as number 8. This book is fine. I think there's some nice elements. Obviously, this is still it's book 7. It's in the fine era. I think Diary of a Wimpy Kid can be broken up into 3 main eras, which is the golden era, which is books 1 through 5, the fine era, which is 6, 7, 8, and then basically the Fru era, which is 9 through 15. We've talked enough about the Fru era. Fru. I mean, Fru. So this is in the fine era. So we're in fine territory. I mean, this is a book. This is he's in high school. He's a kid. He's doing normal kid stuff. He's running for class president or something, or Riley. He's trying to get Riley to run for social chairperson, which is a whole other thing, because in one of the books he runs for class president. I mean, Jeff's recycling. Jeff recycles. Jeff recycles. But basically the premise of this, which really comes in at the end, as maybe you can tell from the title and the picture, is that there's a Valentine's Day dance, and Greg's all stressed. He doesn't have a date. None of the girls want to go with him. Why? It's in the title. He's a wimpy kid. And he decides he has this opportunity to go with this girl named Abigail with Rowley, so it would be the 3 of them, Greg, Rowley, Abigail, as friends. I wonder where the third wheel comes from. Obviously, at the dance, Greg is trying really hard, but he's just coming off as a jabroni. And Rowley's just doing his thing, and Abigail's into Rowley's thing, and they start hanging out at the dance, and Greg's left on the side, and he's acting like a fool. He thinks he's the best, but he's not. I mean, this book is fine. There's just classic Greg Heffley hijinks. It's not all that inventive, but it's true to middle school. I think there's some fine elements. There it is. That's number 8. Now, we are entering the pretty good section. So this next book I have coming in at number 7 is Cabin Fever. And actually, when I was doing my research, I found that a lot of people think this is the best book in the series. I disagree. But it is pretty good. I give this book credit for being pretty streamlined. So this is the OG of The Meltdown, which is book 13. There's a blizzard. Basically the premise, there's a couple things that happen, but the basic premise is that Greg's in school and there's this holiday bazaar that they have at school that makes a lot of money, and Greg wants to make money, so he tries to make his own holiday bazaar, and he tries to advertise it by putting up posters on the school. And it starts raining, and the posters are on these green neon signs, and the green neon signs leave prints on the school, and then people think someone vandalized the school, and Greg doesn't confess. So he's all worried that he's going to get arrested. And then right as that all goes down, there's a huge blizzard that locks everybody in. So there's a plot. I mean, this is the first time in this list where we have a real plot going on. And I give him credit for that. I think the idea of Greg wanting to do his own bazaar is pretty funny. I think classic Greg wanting money. I mean, he's a selfish guy. And also he's a wimpy kid. So it doesn't work out. But there's some good moments. I think, everywhere you flip in this book is pretty funny. I mean, Greg and Riley make a newspaper to try and advertise this bazaar, and they try to get they need advertising, so they get this guy Papa Tony, who makes pizza, to do an advertisement, but obviously Greg does something stupid and writes up a terrible review about Papa Tony. I mean, there's just Greg Heffley hijinks. It's the Greg Heffley hijinks you expect when you flip open a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. Where this book goes awry is when they are in the house during the cabin fever, during the blizzard, and Manny, the little brother, takes a really big role, and that the power goes out in the house and all this stuff goes wrong. It honestly makes me think of the beginning of quarantine. I mean, they're running out of food, they don't know what to do, the dad's far away in some hotel living it up just because he was on a business trip, but Manny jumps on the mom's glasses so the mom can't see, so Greg has to be in charge, but Manny's just being a little something. And you find out at the end that the power was never really out, and that Manny was just being a little something. A fru, may I say. A fru. And he turned off all the power in the house, just except his room, because it was every man for himself. I don't know. It's just stuff like that where it's a good concept, but it doesn't have to be crazy like that. Those are the moments that really pull me out. And as I said, I firmly want to be in this world when I'm reading it. There's a nice ending, though. I mean, Greg, obviously with bad intentions, is trying to look for money on the street. I mean, more context is needed for this point, but I'm not going to give it. But he ends up shoveling this church driveway, and he doesn't get arrested for vandalizing. Like, it has a happy ending, and he grows as a person. Very rarely in these books does character development happen, as you can tell, because Greg has been wimpy for 15 books now. But he has some character development, which is nice. It's a good book. Cabin Fever, good. Coming in at number 6 is Hard Luck, which is book 8. And this book is actually very interesting, I think, in that it's sort of a pairing with book 7, The Third Wheel, and that this book takes place directly after the events of The Third Wheel, which makes sense, book 7 into book 8. But usually these books don't flow into each other the way these two do. At the end of book 7, Riley and Abigail get together. And this book sort of is exploring the fallout of that, where Greg and Riley are not pals anymore. And it's sort of Greg trying to fend for himself. which I actually think is pretty good. I think that's a good concept to have. It's realistic. I mean, everyone in middle school has had some rocky friendship at some point, and they've had to figure out, what am I going to do on my own? And obviously, Greg gets into all sorts of trouble. He tries being alone for a bit. Then he realizes he needs a new friend, so he tries to get Fregley, of all people, to be his friend, and tries to mold Fregley. But Fregley ends up actually being cool, because he can chew bubblegum with his belly button and also blow bubbles with it, which, I mean... And then, after the whole Fregley thing, he finds this magic 8-ball and then uses the magic 8-ball for all his guidance, which is kind of funny and a little bit ridiculous. And this is good. And then at the end, Abigail and Riley break up. Abigail kind of breaks Riley's heart, and they become pals again. It's a nice happy ending. I think this is, a nice, interesting book. I think it was experimental of Jeff. I will even say it was experimental for him to take Riley out of the equation, because Riley's just, the trusty sidekick the whole time. Oh my God, this is 31 minutes long. Oh my God. Anyway, that's enough about Hard Luck. It's fine. Now we have entered the Golden Era. The original 5 books. These 5 books are great. The order that I have, I'm going to stick with it, but you can mostly interchange all of them. Here we are, coming at number 5, Dog Days. Now this one, similar to Cabin Fever, also surprised me, but in the sense that this one was actually rated low, or lowest, on a lot of people's lists. And I guess I can see why. There's a lot of hijinks that happens, and Greg actually learns nothing at the end, and there's really no sense of the ending. I mean, it just ends with, a best summer ever album that his mom made. Obviously, it was not a great summer. He and Riley ran into some problems. There's all sorts of stuff going on. But I like this book. This book takes place over summer break. It's the first of its kind to do that. Usually all of them take place at school, so that was fun. And you got to explore the different summer things. You have Greg and Riley chilling at Riley's country club, but they don't realize that all the food they order actually costs money, and then they have to earn the money, so then they start up a lawn care service. That's interesting, and I'm just flipping through just to remind myself. It's just classic summer stuff. I feel like what Diary of a Wimpy Kid does really well is just make you remember all those times when you were a kid and you thought, oh, geez, being a kid sucks. And this is good at tapping into the summer stuff, like hanging out at the pool, and there's bees everywhere, and you go to the boardwalk, you want to ride the cranium shaker, and it sucks. And I don't know. This book is fine. I think it's fun. There's some good moments. Dog Days. Good. All right, number 4. The Ugly Truth. This is book number 5. I like this one. This is kind of a funny book. The main theme of this one is, every middle schooler's least favorite topic, which is puberty. And just sort of that competitive nature of, Greg feeling like, he's smaller than everyone. Riley's getting taller. Riley's getting zits. Some people are growing mustaches. And Greg is wondering when the heck it's all going to kick in for him. I think that's something that everyone could relate to at some point. There's some good moments in this one. Good jokes. Different good characters. I'd say the squeaky wheel of this book is similar to The Meltdown in that Uncle Gary is having a wedding and Greg just lists all these different crazy family members he has. All right, I got the page. Just all these different family members, and they all have some shtick about them, and I don't know. I'm just not a big list guy, which is funny because here I am. It's 35 minutes into a list, but I wouldn't watch this video. I don't know why you are. But there's some good moments. I mean, there's this big party. Jordan Jordan Jury's party. He's this big 8th grader that hosts these crazy parties, and Greg wants to get in and finally goes, but he's actually just a servant for all the cool kids. I mean, there's just, classic relatable stuff. There's a lock-in that the school has where all, Greg is thinking, oh, it's going to be a slumber party with the guys and the girls, but they separate the guys and the girls, and it just, it's just classic middle school. And I feel like that's where this book and the series really excels anyway. So there it is, number 4, Ugly Truth. We've entered the top 3. Here we go. Maybe this will surprise you. Number 3, Roderick Rules. Book 2, famously, a lot of people love this book. I love this book. This top 3 was hard to choose. You can't go wrong with any of them. This book is great. I mean, tough act to follow with the first book being so strong. But this book is really great in that it keeps, and I'm going to talk about this more when we get to the original book. But what this book does is it continues off of the true, honest diary style with all the short entries and just sort of chaotic jumping around points. But it adds some linearity to it. Linearity? Word? You know what I mean. Some trajectory. Obviously, in the title, this book focuses on Roderick and the brother dynamic that Greg and Roderick share. Roderick is kind of a jerk to Greg, classic older brother. He's in his heavy metal band, Loaded Diaper. And just sort of exploring that. And I think anyone with an older sibling or anyone with a younger sibling, even if you are sort of the Roderick figure, I think you'd get something out of it. There's a whole scene, the whole sort of tension of the book is that something really embarrassing happens in the beginning that Greg doesn't tell you, that happened over the summer, that Roderick knows. And he's kind of holding it over Greg's head the whole time, and then Greg sort of screws up and ruins Roderick's chance at winning the talent show or something like that, if I remember correctly. And Roderick tells everyone the big secret, which is that Greg accidentally ended up in the women's restroom of Leisure Towers, which is the retirement home that his grandfather lives in. But it's good. There's some character development. It's right here in the line on the last page. Even though Roderick can be a huge jerk sometimes, he is my brother. I mean, that's good stuff that kids need to read. It's fun to read. It's fun to come back to, because no matter who's in your family, you just roll with it. I mean, these are your people. And obviously, we find out that plants do not sneeze, which science is grateful for this one. So that's Roderick Rules. Coming in at number 2, may surprise you, is the original Diary of a Wimpy Kid, also called Greg Heffley's Journal, which I actually didn't realize, but there it is right there, Greg Heffley's Journal. This book is perfect. It's the one that started it all, and you got to give it credit. But this is the book that was most true to the form of the series. I guess that's sort of a confusing statement, but it's really written in a true diary entry style. I mean, there's one moment in particular that comes to mind where the entry is a second long. I think, I just think it's that kind of realistic stuff that really sells this book. But the other thing that goes on is this book takes place over a whole year. I believe it's a 6th grade experience, and I don't think any of the other books take place over a whole year. Maybe Roderick Rules, I forget. I actually don't think so. And so a lot of ground is covered. So there isn't really like one big storyline. I guess the big storyline is that it's just this guy named Greg, and he's just trying and he's just failing, and I guess that's the appeal of the series. But they go through Halloween, there's all that sort of stuff, and then there's the wrestling unit in gym, and Greg wants to get all jacked, and it snows, and Greg rolls this giant snowball with Rowley, and then Riley breaks his arm, I think, at some point. I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff. And then there's the school musical at the end. This really, it's all encompassing. It covers a lot of ground. It does it very well. There's tension. Greg learns things. He improves as a person at the end. There's the cheese. There's the cheese touch. There's Zooey Mama. I mean, this is really the book. There's not much else to say. It's perfect. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, number 2. But I didn't choose it as number 1 because, 1, I thought it's a bit obvious, but 2, I think it's sort of perfect in its unperfect way. It's not really that much of a story. It's just sort of a diary. But if you want to get down to the best story in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, it would be number 1, Book 3, The Last Straw. I think this is the greatest Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, and I don't think it's ever going to be topped. This comes after Roderick Rules. This one is the most defined. This one has the most defined story, which I think is its strongest point. The first book is sort of Greg versus the world. Scott Pilgrim versus the world. It's sort of Greg versus the world and Greg versus Rowley. And then book 2 is Greg versus Roderick. And The Last Straw is Greg versus his dad, which is a pretty classic, when you're a kid, you're going at war with your dad. And especially for someone like Greg, who is a wimpy kid. The dad wants him to not be a wimpy kid, which is pretty hard because he's written to be that way. But the dad wants him to be a man and to toughen up. And Greg is trying his best. Greg, he goes out for the soccer team. He becomes a Boy Scout at some point. He's always consistently trying to impress his dad because his dad says if he doesn't toughen up, he's going to send Greg to military school or boot camp, what have you. So that's the plot. I mean, there's a legit plot. There's also a side plot, which I also really like, because there's this girl, Holly Hills, which, who doesn't know Holly Hills? She's only the most popular girl in the school. And Greg has a crush on her and is trying to impress her, trying to get her to notice him, but obviously, being the wimpy kid, consistently fails. But that's sort of a nice thing that I feel like, everyone can relate to, is trying to impress someone. But this book, I mean, it's just got it on lock. There's good moments, there's good development. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's funny, it's fresh. It has a happy ending. It's got really big typeface. There's not much more you can ask for a book. So that's why I put it at number 1. And with that, the ranking is done. So thanks for watching. If you stayed this far, thank you. And let me know in the comments what you think. If you agree with my list, let me know. If you disagree, let me know. I'd love to chat. But yeah, just, keep enjoying the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. I know Jeff's going to keep pumping these out for the next 3,000 years. So probably not going to make another list, but I'll stick them somewhere. But yeah, thanks for sticking around. This has been a review.